You do not wake to a bed. You wake to the smell of the river before the light comes. Low tide on the Thames and the mud is already breathing. Sour black sewage, rot fish, and something older underneath it. The cold has gone past your skin and settled in the bone hours ago. Your feet are bare because shoes are worth more than you are. And the mud takes the first step like it has been waiting, swallowing your foot to the ankle, warm and soft and wrong. Somewhere above you, a city of 3 million people is throwing its filth into the water, and you are about to climb down into it on purpose. Because the river is not a river here. It is a wage. The bank they send you down to has a name the gentlemen use, the foreshore. It sounds almost clean when they say it. It is the strip of mud the river uncovers when the tide pulls back, twice a day, every day, for anyone poor enough to need it. And you need it. You came down the slick stone stairs in the dark with the others, a line of small shapes and old shapes, nobody in between, because the people who do this work are either too young to be wanted anywhere else, or too old to be wanted anywhere at all. You are barefoot for a reason that is not pride. Boots cost money, and the mud would steal them on the second step, and you would owe for them the rest of your short life. So you read the river with the soles of your feet instead. You learn the difference between mud that holds you and mud that wants you. You learn it the way an animal learns a trap, by watching the ones who learned it wrong. The light comes up gray and the foreshore shows itself. It is not a beach. It is the floor of the city turned inside out, broken brick and coal dust and the bones of things, glass worn smooth by the river, rope gone soft and black, the ribs of an old boat sticking up like something half buried that gave up half escaping. The smell is its own weather. You stopped noticing it years ago, which is its own kind of horror, that a child can grow used to standing inside the breath of a sewer and call it morning. Nobody chose this. That is the first thing to understand. You do not apply to be a mudlark. You are born downward into it. Your mother did it. Her hands were the color of the riverbed, and they never came fully clean. And you have her hands now. Somewhere a boy your age is being measured for a school coat. Somewhere a girl your age is learning the piano with clean fingers. You are learning which lumps in the dark are coal and which are dog. The city has decided, before you could speak, which side of the water you belong to. The youngest down here are 5 years old. Think about that number for a moment. 5. Small enough that the cold takes them faster. Light enough that the soft mud does not pull them under the way it pulls the heavier ones, which is the only mercy the river offers a child, and it is not really a mercy. The oldest are past 60 and bent like the boat ribs, working because the workhouse is the only other door, and they would rather drown in open air than die behind that wall. Between the very young and the very old, there is almost nobody. The river takes the middle of a life and keeps it. Subscribe if you want to keep climbing down into the centuries the school books washed clean. Winter is the season that does the killing, and winter is the season you cannot afford to miss. The river runs colder than the air, and the mud freezes at the edges into gray teeth that cut as cleanly as the glass. Your feet go numb in the first minute, which sounds like a mercy, and is the opposite, because a numb foot does not feel the broken bottle it steps on, and you finish the tide leaving small red prints in the frost, and you do not know whose blood it is until you sit on the stair and look. The cold takes the youngest first. A child who stops shivering on the foreshore is a child the others carry up, and not always in time. And still you go down, every freezing low water, because a sack of coal sells for more when the city is cold, and the city is cold, and you are the one who has to be colder to fetch it. You have no tools that a tradesman would call tools. You have a basket or an old sack slung across your chest, already heavy with damp. You have a stick, if you are lucky, to turn the heavier stones and to test the ground in front of you before you trust your weight to it. And you have your hands bare, blue at the knuckle, the nails worn to nothing from 1,000 mornings of raking cold filth for things other people threw away. Your hands are the tool, and the river spends them like coins. The work itself is simple to describe and almost impossible to survive for long. You walk the mud bent double, eyes down, and you take anything the city will pay a coin for. Lumps of coal first, fallen from the barges, the small black wages that fill the sack one cold piece at a time. Copper nails worked loose from old hulls, worth more than anything if you can spot the green gleam of them in the muck. Rope, dragged up and wound around your arm, sold back by weight to be picked apart into oakum, bones, white in the gray, for the men who boil them into other things you do not ask about. Iron, lead, a scrap of canvas, a button, a coin, once in a long while a coin. You are not alone out here, and the others are not your friends. They are the same hunger wearing different rags. A good find is a good find for one person only, and everyone saw where your eyes went. The older ones know the spots the river favors, where the current folds its leavings against a particular stair or a particular ruined wharf, and they guard those spots the way a starving dog guards a doorway. You learn to read the mud, and you learn to read the people on it, and you learn that the second skill keeps you alive more often than the first. A good tide has a rhythm to it. Once you know how to read it, you start high, where the firmer ground gives you the small certain things. The coal first, because coal is always there, and coal is always money. Picked one black lump at a time until your fingers will not bend. Then you work down as the water keeps falling, into the richer, softer ground where the heavier finds settle, the rope and the metal and the bone. You keep one eye always on the brown line of the water, and one eye always on the mud in front of your feet. And a third eye you grow over the years for the other people, the ones drifting toward your stretch of bank. You do not straighten your back. Straightening your back costs you fines and warns the others. You have stopped working a spot. You stay bent. You stay moving. You stay quiet, hour after hour, until the river tells you it is done with you. Low tide does not wait for you, and it does not last. You have hours, not a day. 2 windows when the water pulls back far enough to work, and you take them both whatever the clock says, which means some of your tides come in the black before dawn, and some come in the black after dusk, and you work them by the feel of your hands, because the river does not care that you cannot see. And when the tide turns, it turns faster than a child can run across deep mud. That is not a story they tell to frighten you. That is arithmetic written in drowned names. Every step is a small decision about whether you will keep your foot. The mud near the water is the worst, the soft gray kind that looks the same as the firm kind, until you are in it to the knee, and it is pulling back, and the more you fight, the more it takes. People have stood like that, caught, calm at first, then not calm, while the brown line of the water came back across the flats toward them at the speed of a walking man. You cannot dig out what the river wants to keep. You learn to fall sideways and spread your weight and crawl. You learn it before you are 6, or you do not get the chance to learn it at all. And under your bare feet, hidden in the soft black, is everything sharp the city ever finished with. Broken bottles, the jagged lids of tins, rusted hooks and nails, and the snapped bones of animals filed to points by the current. You will cut yourself today, not maybe. You will open your foot or your hand on something you never saw, in water that is one long, warm ribbon of human waste, and the wound will close over that filth and remember it. A small cut from a rusty edge could set your jaw shut within the week, lock it so you cannot eat or scream, and there was no cure for that. Only the locked, grinning days at the end of it. The river does not need to drown you. It has slower ways. If you think the cold is the worst of it, stay where you are, because the cold is the kindest thing the river will do to you all day. Wait until you see what the mud is actually made of, and where it comes from, and who sent it down to you. Because here is the truth the clean histories leave out. The river is not dirty by accident. It is dirty by design, by the shape of the city above it, by who lives at the top of the hill and who lives at the bottom. Every grand house in this city has a drain. Every drain runs downhill. And downhill always, eventually, is the river you are standing in, the waste of 3 million bodies, the runoff of the slaughter yards, the poison of the tanneries and the gasworks and the dye houses. All of it pours into the same water, and then the tide spreads it across the mud, and then a child climbs down to harvest what is left. The rich do not think about the river, except to complain of the smell when the wind turns wrong. They live up the hill in the clean air, and their filth flows down through pipes they will never see, into the water where your hands are. That is the whole machine in one picture. Their comfort is your ground. The thing they flush and forget is the thing you sift for warmth and bread. You are standing in the underside of their day. The river is where the two halves of the city finally touch, and they only touch because one of them is drowning in what the other one throws away. Picture the other end of the same pipe, a house up the hill, with windows that do not let the smell in, a table laid with white cloth and silver and meat you have never tasted and would not have a name for. The plates are cleared. The scraps and the bones and the grease are carried away by servants who carry them away from servants of their own. And somewhere below all of that, the waste of the meal joins the waste of the house and runs down through the dark and out into the water. The gentleman at that table will read in his paper that the river is a disgrace and a danger to health, and he will be right. And it will never once occur to him that the river is a disgrace because his own drain helped make it one, or that a child is standing in the result of his dinner at this exact hour, blue at the knuckle, sifting it for coal. Distance is the great luxury the rich buy, not just the clean air and the silver, the distance that lets a man foul a river and pity it in the same breath. Ask yourself what runs downhill from your own comfort that you never have to look at. Tell me in the comments. And sometimes, rarely, the river hands the poor a piece of the rich by mistake. A coin slipped from a careless pocket on the bridge above, a spoon, a buckle, a thing of real metal washed down from a better street. Those are the days the mudlarks dream about, the lucky tide, the find that means meat instead of bread. But you cannot eat a dream, and most tides give you nothing but coal and cold and the same aching back. Wealth falls into the river the way lightning falls into a field. You can stand out in it your whole life, waiting, and it will land on someone else. The damage does not stop when you climb back up the stairs. It follows you home. The filth you waded in goes into every cut and every crack of your skin, and the diseases that lived in that water were the great killers of the age. Cholera ran through these districts like a scythe, and cholera lives in exactly the water you work in, the water fouled by waste, and you swallow a little of it every time the spray catches your face. You do not connect the two. Nobody has told you yet that the river that feeds you is the same river that empties the graveyards. You only know that people on the foreshore get sick and thin and gray, and then one tide they are simply not there. Your skin is the first thing to go. It cracks and weeps and itches and never heals because it is never dry and never clean. Your chest fills with the cold and the coal dust and the river damp, and it stays full, a wet rattle that gets worse each winter. Your hands stiffen, your eyes weaken from straining at the gray. And all of it for a few pennies a day, sometimes not even that. Pennies you carry to a man who buys what you found and decides what it is worth. Because of course there is a man for that. There is always a man at the top of even this, the lowest trade in the city, taking his cut of the river before you ever see bread. And what does a whole tide buy you? Think of what you are carrying up those stairs. A sack of coal, a coil of stinking rope, a handful of nails if the river was kind, and at the buyer's door it becomes a few coppers, maybe enough for bread, maybe enough for a corner of a room you share with a family that is not yours. Bodies stacked warm against the same wall, because warmth is the one thing the poor can pool. There is no fire most nights, which is its own joke, that you spend your days hauling other people's lost coal out of the river, and cannot afford to burn any of it yourself. You sell the warmth and you keep the cold. You go to sleep hungry, with the smell of the river still on your hands, and you wake before light to go and stand in it again. The hunger is not a feeling here. It is a weather, constant, the thing every decision is measured against. Do not work the dangerous soft mud because you are brave. You work it because the safe ground was picked clean an hour ago. And the empty sack means an empty stomach, and the empty stomach makes the choice for you. Every drowned mudlark made a sensible decision a moment before the river took them. One more reach, one more lump of coal. The bottom of the city is not patrolled by recklessness. It is patrolled by need, which walks people calmly out past the line where the ground stops holding. Understand where this work sits in the order of things. Below the crossing sweeper, below the man who sells matches, below the rat catcher, who at least has a skill people fear and pay for. The mudlark is the floor of the city, the last rung that is still called work and not yet called begging. And the people above you on the ladder need you to be there so they have something to look down on. A society this proud of its order keeps a place at the very bottom and fills it with children, and then it walks across the bridge above their heads and does not look down. You are invisible by agreement. Everyone has decided together not to see you, and the law sees you only when it is convenient. Take the wrong thing, a piece of cargo that fell from a barge, copper that someone still claims, and you are not a starving child anymore. You are a thief, and the same city that left you in the mud will put you in a cell or on a ship for it. The river gives, and the magistrate takes, and neither one asks how old you are. There is no childhood down here to protect. There is only the work and the water and the thin line between scavenging and stealing that the people above you get to draw wherever it suits them. So how does it end, this life? Usually quietly. The cold gets into a chest already ruined, and the fever comes, and there is no doctor for a mudlark. Or a cut goes wrong and the jaw locks. Or one ordinary tide, the soft mud holds a foot a second too long. Or the water comes back a minute too fast, and the river closes over a small shape that nobody on the bridge will ever know was there. The body might wash up days later somewhere downstream, or it might not. The river keeps what it keeps, and either way, the next low tide, there is a new line of small shapes and old shapes coming down the slick stone stairs. Because the hunger that made you did not die with you. It simply needed a new pair of hands. That is the part the gentle pictures cannot hold. There was never just one mudlark. There was always the next one. The river did not take a person and stop. It took them in a line, generation after generation, the same bent backs at the same low water, the same city pouring the same filth down the same hill into the same hands. It was not a tragedy. A tragedy ends. This was a system, working exactly as built, turning the waste of the few into the labor of the many, and the labor of the many into nothing at all. If this sat heavier than any history lesson ever did, leave a like, and the river carries this story to the next pair of hands. The tide is coming back now. You climb the stairs with the sack heavy and wet against your chest, and your feet bleeding quietly, and you do not look back at the water, because the water does not remember you, and you have learned not to ask it to. The river will rise and cover the mud and hide everything you walked through, the coal and the bones and the broken glass, and the place where you knelt. And by the time it pulls back again, it will be someone else down there reading the ground with the soles of their feet. The city above keeps its appointments. The bridge fills with carriages, and underneath it, all the river goes on doing what a river does in a place like this. It carries the filth of the powerful down to the hands of the poor, and it asks nothing of the powerful, and it gives nothing back to the poor, and it does not keep a single name. The mud closes over the place you stood as if you were never standing, and tomorrow, before the light, it opens again for the next pair of small, cold hands. And when you are ready to stand inside another life the world decided to forget, there is more of it waiting here on this channel.